Well, here's some fascinating news. Ben Shapiro gets national radio show. Wow. So we now know who the heir apparent to Rush Limbaugh's throne is. And actually, I think that's a little unfair to say to Ben, because Rush Limbaugh had his heyday in the 1990s. From then on, it's just been like... It's been a slow decline into just total and utter irrelevance. And it's funny because you still see mainstream media treats him like he's a behemoth. But they're citing numbers literally from the 90s when they talk about it. Rush Limbaugh, so popular. It's so popular. In today's day and age, you talk to a millennial about Rush Limbaugh, they don't know who the fuck they are. They're more likely to know who Rush Limbaugh is if they've seen a clip of me mocking him than they are to just know Rush Limbaugh. So, listen, he's super irrelevant. That old generation is super irrelevant. But there is a new rise of certain right-wing personalities, and they are popular, and there's no denying that. Ben Shapiro is one of those people who has a pretty devoted following. So now he's kind of filling the shoes of Rush Limbaugh back from the 90s when he actually was popular. And I don't doubt that he'll get some decent ratings. That is, if anybody actually bothers to turn into AM radio at all nowadays, which is a little bit of a separate question. So the Daily Wire, which is a conservative site run by Ben Shapiro, announced Thursday that it's partnering with Westwood One to broadcast his podcast in New York City, Chicago, L.A., Washington, D.C., Seattle, and Salt Lake City. Now, let's pause. We're talking about predominantly left-wing places there. That's not conjecture. I'm saying if you go and you look at the votes, which politicians they vote for, even voter registration, those New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Seattle, Salt Lake City. Okay, there's a deeper conversation to be had here about who owns the airwaves. And you talk to Tom Hartman, who's been in the radio game. He's a liberal radio host. He's been in the radio game for a long time. He knows all the ins and outs of this, all the details of this. Mike Malloy's another one. There's a reason why you only hear about conservative talk radios. That's what it is. They dominate, and there's almost no liberal talk radio. And that's on purpose. It's because the people who own the airwaves are right-leaning, and so they put people who are right-leaning on the air. And like I said, most of them get no ratings at all. Ben Shapiro might get some decent ratings, but most of them get no ratings at all. So there's really a systemic issue going on here, where you shut out actual left-wing voices. And you see the same thing on TV. So, and people will say, no, MSNBC is a left-wing voice. They're not a left-wing voice. They're a Democratic Party establishment voice. So you have Fox News, which is the propaganda arm of the Republican Party. You have MSNBC, which is the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. You have CNN, which is the propaganda arm of both. Nowhere in corporate media do you have the Bernie Sanders Democratic Socialist left-wing channel. Doesn't exist. It does not exist. So, but that gets to the most important point, which is there's a reason why. So Ben Shapiro is being embraced by the establishment. I mean, that's what this is. If you're going to, on major radio markets all across this country, and you're going to be broadcast, and Ben Shapiro, even though I would argue his ideology is significantly more extreme than a guy like me. I mean, I represent a milquetoast moderate in the rest of the industrialized world. If you look at the developed world, I'm a fucking moderate. People who listen to this show think I'm too moderate. They're like, what if really that's all you want is Scandinavian-style social democracy? I want to go further left than you, Kyle. So he's got a much more extreme ideology than I do. But why is he being propped up by the establishment? Why is he able to get a deal to get on major radio markets? I'm not able to get a deal to get on major radio markets. Not saying I've tried, because I haven't, nor would I even necessarily want to do that, because there's constraints, you can't curse, yada yada. But the reason why he's embraced, but somebody like me, I'm not embraced, is because one of us serves power and the other one does not. See, the whole point of this show is to question shit. and to say, hey, I don't think the way that works makes sense. I think that's kind of bullshit. Well, if you're pointing at everything, I think that's bullshit, I think that's bullshit, I think that's bullshit, and the things that you're calling bullshit, it largely makes up how the system functions and the corporate powers that are already in place, well, that's not going to be allowed. That kind of dissent can't be tolerated because you're questioning the fundamental underpinnings of the system. Now, a guy like Ben Shapiro, what's he critiquing? Oversensitive, authoritarian college kids, social justice warriors. Now, I critique social justice warriors too, of course, but I'm under no illusions about how powerful they are. They're fucking dumb, authoritarian college kids who have no institutional power. But see, if that's who you're critiquing, fucking social justice warriors and transgender people and, goddamn lefties with your fucking, you want Medicare for all? Is that what you want? You're making my wife a slave if you do Medicare for all. His wife's a doctor, and that's an actual point he makes. He thinks if we do Medicare for all, that means we're enslaving his wife. So, but he is not questioning the people who are really in power, the structures that actually exist. He serves power. Somebody like me critiques power. So he gets propped up. Oh, but all the major radio markets. Here's Ben Shapiro. Let's listen to him shit on trans people for an hour and a half. Oh, isn't this so brave and edgy? No, it's not brave. It's not edgy. If you were brave and if you were edgy, you wouldn't be accepted by the mainstream. That's the whole point. The whole point of being counterculture is I am not accepted in the mainstream culture. So you are. But my point is just admit what you are, though. Like, everybody just needs to admit what he is. That's what he is. He's the next, O'Reilly or Hannity or Limbaugh. But there's a reason why those guys, it's fake edginess. That's the point. It's being a fake counterculture person. Like, oh, look, here they are. Oh, wow, he's strongly critiquing people with no money and no power. How brave and edgy. No, if you're critiquing the right people, you would have never been able to get that deal. So I'm not doing this segment, by the way, to say, he shouldn't be allowed to do this. Because I'm not one of those people who wants to deplatform people or censor people. I think he has every right in the world to speak his mind. That's totally fine, man. By all means, you can go listen to it if you want. But I'm just pointing out the dynamics of what actually is going on here. And the dynamics are, he serves power, I critique power. That's why one of us is accepted and the other one is not accepted.